So Nioh 2 beta came out at the beginning of this month, and even though this video is after the beta ended, I still want to give my quick impressions and coverage of it, as quite a lot of new stuff was revealed and even changed since the closed alpha a few months ago. Now I should mention that I didn't have enough time put into the beta to uncover every little thing the beta had to offer, but these are just some of the bigger things that stood out to me in my 2 playthroughs. One of the big highlights for the new beta was that we can finally test out the new character creation. There was some stuff locked out, but overall pretty flexible in making your character appear as you want. Comparatively, it's more advanced than Monster Hunter and about on par with Souls games CC, being limited to mostly the face and hair. With that said, what makes Nioh 2 CC way better than the others is a dedicated boob sider.
You son of a bitch.
Yes, the Mad Lads did it, and it comes with jiggle physics as well. So yeah, expect to see a ton of big titty female characters being made because of this alone. The other options are honestly pretty average, with the only notable thing being that you can change your back hair separately from your bangs, sorta like Code Vein. However, you're not given complete free reign, as each back piece only has a set amount of bangs you can choose from, and some were more limited than others, and baldies stayed bald. But here's my first created edgy cutie I used in the beta and submitted to their contest they're holding, but as you can see, pretty normal looking due to the hairstyles being mostly traditional Japanese-esque. But there is a dozen or so hair pieces and other options locked out still, so hopefully that gives us enough toys to play with in the final game. We will get to customize our yokai forms a bit in the final game, which is cool too. Another neat thing before moving on is you can still change and save different creations you've made after starting the game via the hut. So you're not locked into that character like other games, and you can swap out whenever you feel like it for fashion. One day you could look like an ugly dude, and another day maybe a cute Miku cosplay. Alternatively, if you want the Nioh 1 vibes, you can always just transform as William and play that way. Smile. Moving on to graphics and settings, I will say graphically it hasn't improved much from the alpha, if at all. And the frame rate, even on action mode on PS4 Pro, did have some lag and frame drops on solo still, which I presume multiplayer is worse. So hopefully they address that. 60 FPS on consoles, please KT, please. But we did get a new option in the settings, which was motion blur. I turned this on and yeah, game feels more actiony and less flat like Nioh 1. Particularly the grab attacks from the enemies or even your own grapple attacks, the camera felt more dynamic than in the alpha this time, which was cool. We can now play Nioh in English voices this time around too, a welcome addition to the franchise for those that don't want to read subtitles. And you can now use locks automatically in the settings, so saves you from having to manually use them in the inventory every time you pick some up. The UI got some overhauls too. Yokai skills have little bars on them, with the amount corresponding to how many times you can use that skill with the anima you got left. Bosses now have an additional red bar on their key bar. Still not quite sure what this is, but it seems to lower their max key they can have the more you attack them, meaning you break their key faster over time compared to Nioh 1, where they could go back to full key after you start running around a bit. It doesn't seem too impactful now, but later on in post-game, I'm sure this will play a bigger role. In the character menu, we got a status list alongside their icons, so no longer not knowing what the hell something does, just go here and find out what an icon means. We can now filter items in the menu, so if we have tons of weapons or are looking for specific inherits or whatnot, we now have the ability to do so. So this is probably music to the ears that didn't like the amount of junk your inventory got. So now you don't have to wade through each individual piece, but can instead search for what you're actually looking for exactly and just dismantle or sell the rest. Moving on to skill tree. We finally got all our old weapons back and added to the main pool, as well as a new weapon we'll talk about later. This was a worry as the alpha was bare bones with like only 4 weapons. Where's Doublades? Where's Kusurigama, bro? Well, no need to ask that question anymore. They're all here. There are some spots missing on the tree, but I assume these are DLC, so these are likely the only weapons we'll get in the base game for now. One thing I didn't like and couldn't find how to adjust was the cursor speed on this screen. It's kinda way too fast, making it a bit cumbersome to pick your weapon, so slow it down a bit thanks. We can now list the skills in a list menu on the right via square, which makes searching for skills hella more easier than the alpha. Definitely like that. Some skills can be upgraded multiple times with an upward arrow on them indicating that. I didn't have enough time to comb over all the skills, but it seems about the same as the alpha, only a couple new moves at most for the old weapons, which is still kind of a bummer. Now yokai form, yokai shift, has a new tree called Shiftling. Perhaps this is why we thought yokai shift was fairly weak in the alpha. We didn't have access to a plethora of passive abilities that you can get on top of your normal samurai skill tree. To obtain Shiftling skill points, you sacrifice soul cores in the soul core menu. A big complaint I heard on the Reddits was about the Dark Realm and it sucking your ki away. Well, the Shiftling tree can aid against that. The new weapon is called the Switch Glaive, going from saw blade mode in low, a glaive in mid, and a scythe in high. We Bloodborne now, boys. Really sick weapon, and its moveset reminds me of Tonfa, but with more reach. Each form can transition seamlessly from one form into the other, allowing you to combo between all stances fluidly so long as you have the stamina. I think between the new hatches and this, I prefer this one as far as fun and unique factor goes, and the few unique designs you could get in the beta of it look really cool. It does scale with magic, so good for those that want to make magic builds. Although it is odd magic users get a Reaper Glaive as a magic weapon instead of something like, well, that would look like magic or have some form of magical attack. This is quite simply a metal clank skill weapon as far as moveset and design goes. It seems a bit lazy to pin it as magic, but I guess something's gotta scale with it, right? One improvement they can make for the Switch Glaive is the tracking. Some skills, and high stance particularly, had some terrible tracking, causing me to miss a ton of attacks if the enemy moved even a little, so there was a brand new mechanic absent from the alpha called Burst Counter. This consumed a small amount of anima, and it basically is a special parry, primarily against yokai special moves called burst attacks. These attacks are hinted by a red glow, and if you do get hit by the attack, it hurts a ton. However, should you burst counter it and timed it correctly, you'll nullify the attack and usually stun or lower their ki by a lot, and you don't have to be in yokai shift mode to do this. In addition, each yokai form has a unique burst counter, with the Fire Ogre being the easiest as it has hyper armor against non-grapple attacks. The water form is more like an iframe dodge, and the purple is like a shield that can even block grabs. Depleting enemy ki with a burst counter will allow you to follow up with a grapple in yokai form right after. This counter mechanic will likely play a vital role, so prepare to learn it. Although if you did have trouble with Nioh 1 systems, then between ki managing, stance managing, Omnio ninja skills, Dark Realm, yokai skills, and now this, it is getting pretty complex mechanics wise. But perhaps that's a good thing to freshen up and be different from Nioh 1. It'll just require more from you, the player. As my first playthrough, I didn't get the timing of burst counter at the start, so I didn't really use it, and the enemies definitely felt harder than on my second playthrough after finally learning how to use it properly. Levels. The levels that were playable were both good and bad. The first level was awesome. The flow was great, there were multiple routes, unlocking shortcuts opened up new areas, and overall there was a ton of points where it was tough and made you think how you should approach the particular situations. There's also lots of variety in the stage as well. The second playable stage was the snake stage from the alpha, except extended. The first third was fine, but the cave part had 90% different enemies from the alpha, mostly replaced by the new enemies from the first stage of the beta. I'm unsure of whether the alpha or the beta enemies will be the default for our first encounter in that stage, but personally, the beta version was a lot more crap to deal with, and the poison pit end of the stage was just pure bullshit. It felt like New Game Plus version of the stage, so hopefully the alpha version is the one we get on first playthrough. That seemed more natural. Now, a common complaint I heard was the beta was tough. That it was, but I presume these stages are not the starting stages, and that they simply started us out with level 1 gear and maybe slightly lower the health and such of the enemies, as some enemies, particularly Tengu, aka still the worst enemy in the game, took a long time to kill for on level gear. Way too long. Especially the Twilight one you fight on a bridge. Ipan Datra particularly seemed to have more health in this than the alpha as well. And similarly, a lot of tough enemies were bunched up in one spot, and that was pretty common as well. But again, I think in the full game we'll be around level 20 to 30 for these stages, not level 1 to 10. These seem more like chapter 2 sort of stages. There was several new enemies introduced. All of them were great. They had some nasty attacks, but generally, most were easy enough to beat aside the damage sponge part. The scariest looking one was ironically pretty easy to kill, but the Flame Ghost was Tengu tier. Least fighting traditionally. There were 2 new bosses showcased, and the snake from the alpha returned as mentioned, which I'm not sure was the best move on their part. The first boss gave a lot of people trouble. However, once you find that blocking it is way easier than dodging it, it becomes pretty easy. Normally in Nioh, blocking is unviable due to the amount of ki damage you take, but for that boss, its close distance attacks barely took any, so there's a tip for beating it in the final game, assuming that doesn't change. Pretty fun fight though, even if it did spam one attack a little too much. The second new boss was a human, similar to Tachibana, fighting in a small arena. Overall, good fight. He could parry you and deal lots of damage, but honestly, there were videos of people already cheesing him in multiple ways, so humans still have that weakness of being easily exploited by various things, like gunshots to the head, or paralysis bombs, or just stun locked against the wall. Not sure if they plan to address that though. The fight unlocked really early, making it seem hard, but once you got on level to the area the boss was in, it became a lot easier. I will say the snake boss needs a bit of tuning. Hitboxes seem a bit jank on the tail slam attacks, but most importantly, the grab attack. Its instant grab attack has nearly 0 frames to dodge through. It takes a single second for it to do it out of nowhere, and it has big range with a lingering hitbox that'll pull you in despite a dodge. And the grab attack took like 80% of your health. I don't know, it just seemed like you had 0 chance to react, which ended most of the runs against it, so meh. The AI did seem different than the alpha though. The slithering move with its horn attack that everyone hated, that was adjusted and it rarely did it. Whereas the alpha, it did it all the time and its tracking was hella cheap. But not anymore, so it's definitely changed. So please change the grab attack to be a little more lenient, please. Either in dodging it or have a longer startup time before it initiates the grab to impale your face. And that's it for enemies. Now I will say at this point, between both the alpha and beta and their Twitter, they're spoiling a lot of stuff, specifically enemies. But a big complaint of Nioh 1 was lack of enemy variety, right? But so far, there's quite a few that have been revealed, and between both the returning and new yokai, I can say the variety is kicking in. Hopefully they bring more and more for the final game. Overall, after playing the alpha, I was quite unimpressed with how much was new, as you could tell from my earlier videos of it. It just was lacking a bit. But with the open beta, I think there's enough new to say that even for old Nioh fans, it'll be a fresh experience. From the variety of enemies, to the sleek new options and quality of life settings, to more yokai skills and the fact that we can upgrade and combine them to make new powered up cores, to the shifting tree, making yokai shift seem more than just a weaker living weapon, and lastly the new burst counter adding a whole new option to tackle enemies with. It's looking less like Nioh 1.5 and more like Nioh 2 now. My only hopes now are for there to be tons of set bonuses, which will open up build possibilities, maybe even add some returning from Nioh 1, cough cough fanatic set. Perhaps add a couple new yokai forms? We are missing Purity and Lightning after all. I know I said I think the beta weapons will be the only ones in the final game, but I do hope there's at least 1 or 2 more new ones before DLC. Can we get a bladed fan weapon maybe, please? If not, then add like 5 more skills to each older weapon.
Pick one, KT.
But yeah, those were my impressions from what I played. At this point, I just want to play the game. Give Nioh 2 now. Too bad we have to wait till March 2020. Maybe PS5 will release and I can get my 60 FPS for Nioh 2 that way. But what did you guys think of the Nioh 2 beta? Did you think the content was enough to be more impressive to you than the alpha? Or do you still think they should do more in the way of mechanics or content? How about endgame? What could be done for that to spice things up? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. I did do a silent playthrough of each stage, minus the Twilight mission. It'll be in the end screen annotation if you want to see more gameplay. So smash that like button and subscribe for more Nioh epicness.